Racist officer stops black man, then learns he's the head of internal affairs. Mark Riley's shift began before most porch lights flicked off in Brookhaven, Georgia. The midsummer air still carried night's dampness and the scent of pine trees mixed with gasoline as he pulled his cruiser behind a shuttered gas station just off Briarcliff Road. He liked this vantage point, half hidden by a dumpster, able to watch both the sleepy four-lane artery and the weaving side streets that emptied into it. 10 years in uniform had taught him where people relaxed enough to reveal who they really were. As he put it, the department called his approach proactive. Community groups had harsher words: predatory, selective, racist. Riley dismissed them all with the same shrug he gave to briefing room reprimands. Dawn leaked over the horizon while he drained the dregs of his third styrofoam cup of coffee, the kind brewed so strong it left grit on his tongue. Radios crackled with overnight leftovers, domestics, a suspected break-in at the CVS, and then fell silent. Perfect. Quiet meant he could work uninterrupted. He scanned each vehicle by silhouette. An aging Honda, harmless. A battered contractor's pickup, probably running late to a drywall job. A sparkling white SUV with decals from the local private school, practically invisible to his interest. Then came the car that, in his mind, pushed the morning from ordinary to suspicious. It appeared without fanfare, just a black shape cresting a hill, then sliding into the golden smear of sunrise. A Mercedes-Benz S-Class, top trim, he guessed, judging by the chrome scrollwork and tidy hum of its exhaust. The paint gleamed like polished obsidian. The rims caught the light like cut glass. Even before the sedan passed his hiding spot, Riley leaned forward, pupils narrowing. Something did not compute. Luxury, expensive luxury, meant money, and money, in his mental equation, rarely came with dark-tinted windows unless someone had reason to hide. He eased the cruiser into gear, letting a two-car gap form so he could observe. The S-Class obeyed every sign, used its turn signal, kept perfect pace, almost mocking him. That driver was either painfully cautious or completely unconcerned about police attention. Riley felt a flicker of annoyance. Subdued compliance sometimes irritated him more than obvious wrongdoing. He thumbed the light bar, bathing asphalt in rotating red and blue. Inside the Mercedes, the brake lights glowed immediately. No sudden lane change, no acceleration. Riley liked that. Steady nerves told him the driver believed he had done nothing wrong. As the sedan drifted onto the shoulder, Riley lifted his radio mic, but hesitated. Calling in the stop would log it. Time, location, license number, details some activist might subpoena later. He decided on off-air compliance, a trick he'd learned from an older officer. Keep the traffic stop off dispatch until after initial contact. If it went sour, he could always claim the radio died. Parking barely a car length behind, he performed the familiar ritual. Seat belt off, mirror check, touch of a weapon holster for reassurance. The morning was quiet enough that cicadas buzzed louder than the cruiser's idling engine. Approaching on the driver's side, he noted his reflection in the tinted glass. Angular jaw, crew-cut blonde hair, posture rigid with authority. Before he could tap the window, it glided down. The driver's hands were already visible at 12 o'clock on the leather steering wheel. A charcoal gray suit sleeve revealed a silver watch blinking in the sun. The man, mid-50s, dark-skinned, composed, offered no greeting, only a nod that suggested he knew the choreography. Riley skipped pleasantries. License, registration, proof of insurance, he said, words clipped as a drill instructor's cadence. The documents appeared in a neat bifold, extended with deliberate calm. A faint cologne, cedar and citrus, escaped the car, painting a scent Riley privately associated with boardrooms rather than Brookhaven's cracked sidewalks. He glanced at the license, Charles Edward Madison. Underneath, in fine print, Georgia Department of Public Safety. A small state emblem embossed the card's corner, but Riley's pulse was too quick to absorb details. He wanted context. Why was a black man in a luxury sedan cruising through his beaded dawn? Why the heavy tint? What business needed that level of discretion? Questions stacked like bricks, each heavier with suspicion. His gaze flicked downward, catching the reflection of his own badge in the sedan's mirror. For a split second, he imagined how the scene looked from inside, a uniformed white officer looming over a black driver. The thought vanished. Riley was well practiced at swatting away introspection. He cleared his throat. "Where you headed, Mr. Madison?" he asked, stressing the honorific just enough to sound polite, yet probing, as though the title itself were provisional. The driver's answer came with measured precision. "Downtown Atlanta. My office." No extra words. No defensiveness. Riley pressed again, trying to unwrap the enigma. But for every question, Madison offered only the smallest, most accurate fragment of truth, sufficient, cooperative, infuriatingly calm. Riley's coffee-fueled nerves began vibrating. The stop no longer felt routine. It felt like a chess game played at a speed he couldn't control. And somewhere beyond the cicada hum, beyond the rolling red-blue lights, dawn broke fully, casting long shadows and hinting that the real story of the morning had only just begun. Riley hated silence. In the 10-second gulf after Madison's "Terse my office," the hush seemed to inflate until it pressed against his eardrums. He shifted his stance, scuffing gravel with his boot. Defensive. Might as well push. "What kind of work puts you in a suit at this hour?" he asked, tone sneaking toward sarcasm, despite his best attempt at professional indifference. Madison looked forward, not at Riley, as though considering the sunrise instead of the officer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost soothing. "Public safety oversight," he said. "I run the Division of Internal Affairs for the Georgia Department of Public Safety." The phrase wasn't loud, but it cracked in Riley's mind like a dropped baton. He had expected consultant, business owner, maybe even attorney, something respectable but irrelevant. Internal Affairs was the opposite, a name officers invoked derisively during locker room grumbles, but one that sent a chill all the same. It meant investigations, subpoenas, careers dissected under fluorescent lights. Riley's throat dried. He scanned the ID again. There it was, Director, embossed in silver laminate. Momentarily, training fought instinct. Respect the hierarchy, de-escalate, send him on his way. But ego shoved back. Being wrong in front of subordinate was one thing. Being diminished by a stranger worse. A stranger who embodied the very oversight Riley resented, felt intolerable. He needed to assert control, if only to quell the sudden throb in his temples. "Step out of the vehicle, please," he ordered. The words surprised even him with their sternness. A flicker crossed Madison's face, something between disappointment and silent calculation, then vanished. He turned off the Mercedes, opened the door, and unfolded himself to full height. He was taller than Riley had estimated, shoulders square, posture unhurried. Standing on the roadside, suit sleeves brushing against passenger door glass, Madison clasped his hands loosely in front of him. "Officer, am I being detained?" The question was neutral, none of the edge Riley had expected. Traffic whispered by in the distance, but the road immediately around them felt deserted, like a stage where every spotlight hung on a single answer. Riley eyed the dashcam angled from his cruiser's windshield. He realized the lens recorded not only his decisions, but Madison's unflappable calm. "Just a routine check," he mumbled, the phrase brittle. Yet he kept his palm near the holster, posturing. Madison's gaze flicked to the gesture, then back up. Moments stretched. Riley felt sweat accumulate beneath his body armor. A stray memory surfaced, departmental lecture slides on bias-based policing. The ones he'd scrolled through half listening while thinking about weekend plans. Now those slides played in high def. The minority driver, the white officer, the discretionary stop. He steadied himself, forced his voice into procedural monotone. "Any weapons or contraband on your person?" Madison's nostrils flared, the only sign of irritation he'd let escape. "Officer," he said, quieter still, "you have my identification. You have my destination. You have no legal basis for a search." His eyes, deep-set and steady, held Riley's as if weighing them on scales of law. "Please confirm whether I'm free to go." The formal cadence, devoid of fear, hollowed the last of Riley's resolve. "Detain him, and you'll answer to his office by lunch. A rattled voice inside his head warned, "Release him, and you've surrendered control." Either way, the power balance had inverted. He swallowed. "Yes, sir," he said at last. "You're free to go." Madison gave a single nod, not victory but acknowledgement. He stepped back into the Mercedes, adjusted the mirror, perhaps catching Riley's slumped shoulders in the reflection, and pulled out smoothly onto the road. The engine was little more than a whisper before distance swallowed it. Riley stood alone, lights still rotating pointlessly over empty pavement. Only then did he remember he had never radioed in the stop. No record on dispatch logs, no call number, just the digital witness of the dashcam he'd forgotten to disable. Panic prickled his scalp. Could he claim equipment malfunction? Could he delete the file? He glanced at the cruiser's console. The recording indicator still blinked, unwavering. In the rear view of memory, he saw Madison's calm eyes again. They hadn't just looked at him. They had measured him, like an auditor cross-checking receipts. Riley sat in the driver's seat, windows rolled up, the smell of stale coffee and vinyl filling the cabin. He replayed the stop in his mind, the unnecessary order to exit, the hand near his gun, the questions framed like accusations. For the first time in years, he felt exposed, not to the public, but to the quiet machinery of accountability he'd assumed would never set foot on his patch of highway. He started the engine, pulled from the shoulder, and told himself to breathe. Below the calm facade, adrenaline still pulsed. He had no idea that somewhere down the interstate, Madison was already composing a debrief memo, in crisp, unemotional language, documenting everything he'd just lived through. Charles Madison's Mercedes glided into the secure parking deck beneath the Georgia Department of Public Safety headquarters 42 minutes after leaving Brookhaven. The elevator ride to the 11th floor felt longer than the drive. He replayed Officer Riley's face, the stubborn set of the jaw, the flutter of nerves under bravado. In the lobby outside Internal Affairs, Madison greeted his chief investigator, Rachel Diaz, with a nod. She had been tracking Brookhaven complaints for months, mapping patterns that pointed to a single name. "Was it him?" she asked. Madison handed her the dashed blue citation pad Riley never used, still blank. Proof of a stop that should have been documented but wasn't. "It was him," he confirmed. "Pull every related file. Today, by noon, a Phase 1 special review." Memo hit the desks of the Public Safety Commissioner and the Attorney General's liaison. It laid out data Diaz had compiled. 117 traffic stops by Riley in 6 months, 91 involving Black or Latino drivers. Dashcam footage samples revealing a tone of dismissiveness that flirted, often, with hostility. Complaints previously dismissed as anecdotal now clattered like ammunition in the evidentiary belt Madison assembled. The memo's closing paragraph summarized that morning's encounter in composure, so clinical it bordered on lethal. Director Madison personally observed behavior consistent with discriminatory profiling and unlawful detention tactics. The machinery turned fast once someone at the top threw the switch. Digital forensics subpoenaed hard drive images from Brookhaven's IT supervisor before anyone could misplace files. Patrol shift logs were frozen. Supervisors instructed not to alter after-action reports. Training officers were interviewed about Riley's academy performance, revealing old murmurs of biased remarks buried under years of backslapping camaraderie. Each discovery fed a growing narrative. Mark Riley was not a rogue outlier. He was a problem tolerated, maybe even tacitly encouraged, by a chain of command more worried about clearance stats than community trust. Meanwhile, word traveled differently on Brookhaven streets. A black-owned coffee shop near Main Street hosted a lunchtime buzz of guarded optimism. Patrons scrolled social media screenshots of State House reporters tweeting rumors. Sources: officer at center of profiling allegations under IA review after traffic stop with high-ranking DPS official. Some cheered. Others were wary. Justice moved slow, if at all, when uniform shielded the accused. Yet hope flickered, fragile and insistent, that maybe this time accountability wore a face too high to ignore. Riley learned of the investigation 2 days after the stop via a terse voicemail. Report to headquarters, administrative leave, pending inquiry. He played the message 3 times, each repetition hollowing his stomach further. The next morning he arrived in plain clothes, department policy for suspended personnel, and surrendered his weapon at the security desk. The metal detector beep sounded louder than usual, as though punctuating every step toward the interview suite where Madison waited. The room was deliberately neutral, beige walls, a rectangular table, recording devices blinking red. Diaz sat to Madison's right, legal counsel to the left. Riley's chair faced a blank wall, no window, no clock. Madison began not with accusation but chronology, walking Riley through timestamps. 6:59 cruiser repositioned, 7:02 lights activated, 7:06 verbal order to exit vehicle. Facts, not tone. Yet each detail was a thread yanked from Riley's stitched-together defense. Midway through, Madison slid a printout across the table, a heat map of Riley's stops, glowing crimson where minority detentions clustered. Statistical evidence, Diaz clarified, supported by bodycam transcripts and dispatch logs. Riley opened his mouth, closed it. He had explanations, training, suspicious behavior, community policing, but stripped of anecdote and placed beside numbers, they rang hollow. He felt language desert him, leaving behind a desert of dry apologies that even he knew would not save his badge. The formal recommendation landed within a week. Termination for cause, notation of civil rights violations forwarded to the state prosecutor. Riley took the deal to resign in lieu of firing, an agreement that saved pension fragments but stamped his record, making lateral transfers nearly impossible. The union rep called it a witch hunt. Riley, alone in his apartment at night, knew better. He stared at the cardboard box of belongings from his locker, photographs, commendation ribbons, an old notebook scribbled with proactive tactics. They looked less like career trophies and more like relics of a worldview collapsing under daylight. Brookhaven's police chief held a press conference, flanked by city council members. Cameras flashed as the chief acknowledged serious concerns and pledged policy reforms. A reporter asked how many internal warnings had been ignored. The chief's answer stumbled into bureaucratic fog. Across town, activists gathered in the park where they'd marched months earlier, this time with cautious smiles. They did not declare victory. They knew systems adapt, but they celebrated a rare instance where the door to accountability swung wide enough for sunlight to spill through. Charles Madison watched footage of the press conference from his office, lights dimmed, skyline glowing dusk beyond the glass. Diaz entered with fresh complaints, proof that one officer down did not scrub a culture overnight. Madison sighed, signing the intake forms. The work, he knew, was endless. Yet nights like this offered proof of concept, that sometimes strategic intervention, a single, quietly orchestrated traffic stop, could reverberate louder than any public hearing. He thought of Riley's face when power shifted, remembered how silence had become the loudest part of the encounter. Justice, Madison believed, was often silent too. No sirens, no spectacle, just steady, methodical pressure. And in Brookhaven, for the first time in a long while, that pressure had finally found its mark. If stories like this matter to you, if justice, accountability, and truth should never be silenced, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because on this channel, we don't just tell stories. We expose the ones that were never meant to be heard.